Welcome to Unstoppable at Craig, where we pull back the curtain on what makes healthy workplace cultures click and what happens when people are empowered to expand the boundaries of what is possible. We'll explore the perspectives of employees and leaders who have carte blanche to speak their truths, tell their stories, and unlock uncommon ways of approaching challenges. I am Dr. Jandel Allen Davis, CEO and President of Craig Hospital, a world-renowned rehabilitation hospital that exclusively specializes in the neurorehabilitation and research of patients with spinal cord and brain injury. Join me as we learn from people who love what they do and what happens when fear doesn't stifle innovation. Welcome to another episode of Unstoppable at Craig. And today I am joined by Kramer, who is the president and CEO of the Boettcher Foundation. And as we think about, remember that the theme of, if there's a thread that runs through every episode of Unstoppable, it's this notion of what makes for great cultures. And there are things that are tangible, there are things that are intangible that are part of the leadership alchemy that pulls together great cultures. And there's something really, as those of us who have either been beneficiaries of philanthropy or those who have been able to actually be the benefactors of philanthropy, there's something incredible that sort of generosity from millions of people, sometimes a family, sometimes even in the smallest ways, what that fuels in terms of the power of leadership to truly transform and change lives. And so it's just going to be fun to spend some time with my dear friend, Kramer, and we go way back to 2006. That's unbelievable how fast time flies and what our journeys have taken us to where they've taken us over that very, very long time. So I want to thank you, for just saying, yeah, let's talk. That's always fun. But also, the Boettcher Foundation's been an amazing, amazing partner of Craig, and it is part of the fuel that makes this place so, so wonderful. So on behalf of people who are in beds right now here at Craig, family members who are supporting them, team members who are doing the work that they do to support those families, those who have come before, and actually even those who don't know they're going to need us but will. I just say thank you. Thank you, and welcome.
Well, thank you. What a way to start, Jandel. You always get me right there in the heart. And just knowing what an incredible place that this is. And for me, the relationship with Craig is deeply personal in addition to being professional, and the fact that we've been friends for so long, and you're here as following many incredible leaders at Craig over the years, but you in this role here and this place for our community, one of a kind, and it's an honor to come alongside. And the Boettcher Foundation, I know, has supported with many grants over the years and in the mission, and so thank you what you do for the world, not just Colorado.
Well, we both got to say thank you, and I will say you are more than welcome. And I think it's interesting that you said there's the Boettcher sort of part of, which is such a huge part of your story, but then that it's deeply and intensely personal too. So why don't you just start by sharing some of your journey, that journey from intern to president and CEO, and you're celebrating, good grief, how can it be your 27th anniversary of the foundation? But tell your story.
Well, sure. So I alluded to the fact that the relationship with Craig was personal, and that it goes beyond our friendship because the mission is deeply personal to me. And I don't know that a lot of people know this about my story, but I was in a car accident when I was 22 years old and had a traumatic brain injury. And there was a period of time when I didn't know if I'd ever be able to work again. And so the impact on my family and my friends, it was profound. And so just to share a little bit more of the depth of that story and then sort of how it fits in with the Boettcher story too. So I'll take you back to 9th grade. I walk into my new high school, and there was this wonderful guidance counselor, Mrs. Bornhauser, who called me into her office, and she said, "Kate, I think you might be Boettcher material."
Wow.
And I know. And I was like, oh my goodness, what is that? But I better find out. And then had heard of the wonderful Boettcher Scholarship. And so made it my goal throughout high school to try to put myself into a position just to compete because it's very competitive, and feel very blessed that I was lucky to be 40 of the students that were chosen that year when I graduated from high school in 1993. And so I had the chance. It was life-changing. Boettcher's invested in me, too.
Yes.
I'm a beneficiary, but they invested in my potential and paid for my undergraduate education. I went to CU Boulder. And so I had a wonderful experience there. And it ends up being a full circle story with Boettcher because when I was just finishing up senior year, there was this fellowship position that was advertised at the Boettcher Foundation. And I thought, how wonderful. I was newly married to my wonderful partner, Joe Kramer. And we thought, how perfect for me to take a year. It was a year-long fellowship and give back to this organization that had invested in me. And actually, my sister won a Boettcher scholarship, too. So it literally changed our, like generations of our family to have the gift. My parents didn't have to worry about our education. And so the chance to work there under a wonderful leader, Tim Schultz, and have this fellowship, I got the job and was real excited to start. And I was commuting from Boulder. I was just finishing up a last semester at CU. And on my way down to work in downtown Denver, where we're located on Highway 36, classic story, traffic came to a stop, and I was able to stop, but the person behind me wasn't. And so I think the thing that is so just paradoxical about it is, it seemed like it was like, I think, $2,000 worth of damage to my car. And, the thing, it was almost 7 years before I fully recovered in all the ways that I felt kind of back to it. And I wouldn't say back to normal because I think I grew from the experience so much too. But I had seizures as a result of that experience, and I did all sorts of therapy because I had a neck injury as well as the brain injury. But for somebody who had an identity that I felt like if I worked hard enough, I could always get the A, or I couldn't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And so I remember when I was playing Yahtzee with Joe at the time, and I couldn't add the dice. I think we didn't know right away that I had the extent of the injury, or couldn't remember like a phone number, all the digits, or would feel like I'd be reading the same thing. I was still in school, so trying to read the same passages over and over and over, and not feeling like I could get the wiring in my brain to understand what I was reading. And then, had the chance to do cognitive therapy and stuff. And so I'm just so grateful that there were therapists and neurologists that came alongside me in that recovery. But yeah, it was a really scary time. And my neurologist did tell Joe privately, I did not know this at the time, that he wasn't sure that I would be able to work full time. And a lot of that stemmed from just the seizures I would continue to have. So, fighting back through that, I am grateful for all the support, and I was determined. I really was. So at any rate, that's a little bit about that piece. And then the rest of the journey at Boettcher, Jandel, is I'm grateful to them for helping me through that really difficult time in my life where they cut back hours for me and allowed me some accommodations to be able to continue to work. I'm so grateful for that. And it was about within the year that we had a position open. It was a longtime scholarship secretary at the time. And I, at 22, had the audaciousness to put together a proposal of what if we hired a director of the scholarship program? And then I applied. So I wanted the job. And Tim believed in me and let me have the chance to run our scholarship program for 5 years, and then invited me to be the vice president when I was 26 years old. And I certainly grew into that role over time. And I've been the CEO for the last 7.5. So I cannot believe that it's been like a blink, but I've had a chance to do just about every job at the Boettcher Foundation in the period of those 27 years. Yeah.
There was so much in that.
I'm sorry, yes.
No, like in a good way. So first of all, thank you for sharing that way. Your experience with this brain injury, traumatic brain injury, and you're mentioning that it changed you, that that's nobody wants these, but there are ways we hear this walking through the halls. I know this about patients, whether spinal cord or brain injury, who there's a resilience that kicks in, especially if you're supported by the right folk. And by the right folk, it's not just the great therapist. That is what happens within this healthcare domain, but having a boss and working in an organization that says she is one of ours, and we're going to invest in her, and we're going to provide the kinds of accommodations that enable her to get back to or move ahead to whatever's next. And that's a mark of great cultures that I felt it important to say publicly on this podcast, because we are wasting talent when we don't. And look at you today. I mean, it also goes to show how miraculous the brain can be. That recovery can take some time, but it does happen. Brains are that squishy little bit of gelatin between our ears does amazing, amazing things, and it is at the same time still a mystery. But the other thing I heard, back to Tim, who doesn't love Tim Schultz? Let's just start there. In terms of the kind of culture he had built that enabled you to stay for 27 years, and he said yes when you brought things. Talk about the culture at the foundation.
I think that's a great story of evolution, Jandel. And what Tim brought to it, and I feel proud to continue, is I think that philanthropy, and just quick background about Boettcher Foundation, private family foundation, started in 1937 by a wonderful, generous family of serial entrepreneurs in the state. They were immigrants. They came here, like so many, wanting to work hard and build something, and build a family and a life and a community. And they did well. They were blessed. They did well, and they decided they wanted to give back and invest in the state of Colorado. So we do only grant making in the state of Colorado, and throughout that time, we've given away like $420 million in every part of the state. So, but the story of that, it's now 87 years old, the Boettcher Foundation. And when Tim started, it was the period of time, my first jobs, Jandel, when I started as the intern, like the fellowship position, I got the first domain name. I built, thank you, CU Boulder, Leeds College of Business for my business education, but built the website, built a selection database to, try to automate some of all the handwritten selection process that was formerly of the Boettcher Scholarship Program, did the first marketing brochure. So we were coming in a time where technology everything was done when I started. There were secretaries and executives, and we were on typewriters and not networked computers. That was another job that I had to do. So there's a reputation sometimes with philanthropy that it's like the ivory tower and very inaccessible and stuffy. And I would say that there may have been some of that. I was certainly intimidated coming from my Boettcher Scholarship interview when I was, 18 years old.
Yeah. Well, you would have been anyway, right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
But I think what the work to make, and continues to be our work, to make what we do, we are servants, and what we do, we cannot do without people like Craig and all the organizations that we invest in throughout the state. So to make sure that our work is accessible, that we are partners in helping people get the resources that they need. And so he tore down that ivory tower and those walls. And I love that he used to say, Jandel, our job, we can't fund everybody, and not everything fits our priorities. Like it just doesn't. You do these things, and other foundations do other things. But he said, it's a goal always that someone, if they're going to meet with us, that we give them 3 ideas they didn't have. And so this idea of trying to be a connector, that resources doesn't mean like money always, but it's the connections, the ability to connect dots. Like we work throughout the state. So I know what happened in Mancos last year and Holyoke last year and Cortez. And so when people come to us coming with a project that's similar, we connect dots for them. And sometimes we give grants, but we continue to, I think, provide our value, and our part of our philanthropy is our people that work there. Yes. We're part of this gift that the Boettcher family, I think, invested in for the people of Colorado, that we help people find access to resources. in the state.
Gosh, it's interesting. I think that we talk about, the phrase that we have the opportunity to give of time, talent, and treasure.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think until you described it the way you did that philanthropy has the opportunity to do all three, to fuel all three, and maybe the obligation.
I would add, because we talk about this a lot, Jandel, especially with our alumni who they've been chosen because of their leadership and their service, their heart for service.
It's a wonderful
And
program.
so we talk about that philanthropy, I think the way we define it is time, talent, treasure, and ties. Ties. Because one of the things, and that's that connection piece, like if you have access to a community or connection, the power of a network, you know that well. This is the Leadership Denver network we've been part of through the Leadership Foundation all these years. The power of that that network that we can bring to bear to the people that we're supporting and serving, it's powerful beyond just the money that you show up and share your talents or you give your time, invest even with your dollars.
Gosh, so it's like pay it forward. It's a force multiplier, all the words we'd use. And I love the ties part because I think one of the most important thing we do as leaders is service connectors of ideas,
sure.
of systems, of people, of places, and how cool that you get to do the work statewide and can connect communities to each other, great ideas, work that's going on other places. I love the generational issues of being in roles like whatever the roles are. When I was in my mid-40s, I was at KP, Kaiser Permanente,
right.
and had little ones, but I was in clinical practice, so I wasn't home many nights. Well, every third to fourth night, I was out somewhere delivering babies and taking care of women. And then to find ourselves in these CEO roles as women, there's lots of different, it seems to me, lenses we could look at that through, whether it's the lens of ages and stages.
Right.
And I'd wonder, though, through the lens of being a female CEO and not necessarily even mid-40s with kids, but in what other ways did you need to or have you had to navigate challenges, but also opportunities? Like, what do we uniquely bring when we tap into, and I'm going to say it this way, that feminine sort of spirit, I suppose, because men can tap into that too. I think we can do our masculine and our feminine. That's some of what we have to be able to do.
Right. That's a great question. And I think one of the things that I feel most proud of in my life is I've had a chance to be an opportunity to be a trailblazer in a couple of ways. The first female XYZ, like whether it was the first, I grew up in the Episcopal Church and I was the first female acolyte in our church.
I wanted to be an altar boy, but they didn't have them back in the day.
I was
altar
proud of
girl.
That. I was proud of that.
Cool.
And even I was the first executive at Boettcher that was a female. Like we had wonderful, again, they were called secretaries at the time, but I was the first person that didn't have that title in that role. And then even coming into this role, I'm the first female CEO, the youngest, and the first Boettcher scholar. Yeah. And so I take great pride in that being the first. And also it feels like a lot of responsibility.
I was going to say, cuts a few ways, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Those first or something. I don't think that hit me until sometime since I've been over here. First woman, I agree, CEO. First African-American.
Right.
CEO of either gender. And then a number of those crazy firsts. Talk about, I was going to ask you, it's going to be my next question. How do you define or how do you characterize the responsibility that you carry with it, that it comes with?
With being the first?
Yeah. As you said first, it comes with it's really cool.
That's right.
And it has responsibility. What are some of those things?
The first thing I would say is, I had a quote in my bulletin board from the time I was in middle school. I don't know where I came across it, but it was, comparison is the death of true self-contentment. So something like that. I may have misquoted that exactly. But the thinking, I try not to think about that too much because sometimes that feels too big. That responsibility. I just do me. Right?
I love it. What else can we do?
What else can you do, right? I mean, I cannot, I'm never going to be Jandel Ellen Davis or Tim Schultz or who, you pick the leader. I just know how to be Katie Kramer. And I am grateful for my parents for always just encouraging me to be me. And so I just try to think about the things that I value. I think that guides me, things that I care about and how I show up. And I think one of the special ways that, and this is not a female thing, a first thing, it's just maybe a Katie Kramer thing.
Yes.
I just believe we're whole people, Jandel. Like, I don't know how you can like not come into even the workplace and not acknowledge the fact that you have spit up on your shoulder or the car didn't start or the dog, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And that doesn't mean that we're not professional in the workplace, but it's just a recognition that people always are carrying some load.
Yeah.
And we never know that. And so if you don't show up with empathy, no matter what gender you identify with, that's, I think, one of the most important things is seeing people in their wholeness.
And I'd go, if I can interrupt, I would go so far as to say, first of all, I'll say amen. Mm-hmm. I used to say to the last executive team I sat on and say here too, that I'll say it differently. I say people. I used to say our people. I would say those we serve want to see us, and they want to be seen by us. Mm-hmm. They want to see us.
Amen.
The whole of us.
Totally.
You know, for me, when I have to sort of say something that may feel, I don't know, some way, and it's how I'm choosing to hear it or think it, you know, I say, oh my gosh, my pits are sweating, right? Because their pits sweat too. And when you allow yourself, if you allow yourself to bring your whole self to
and
work.
show up in all your humanness,
all the
right?
crazy ways, it's that thing that Marianne Williamson said, or it's also, I think Nelson Mandela must have said it in a speech, that when we hide our light under a bushel basket, we're not serving anyone. And showing your light, bringing all your wonderfulness. That's why I'm sitting here smiling at you, because you listen, I can't be Katie Kramer. Let's just call it. You're saying you can't be Jan. Oh my gosh, you're amazing. When you do that, it gives permission for others to bring their whole selves in too.
So too.
Don't be so dang buttoned up. That's
no doubt. Well, and the other thing I will say is I deeply believe that from our emotion, from our heart comes the power. I really believe that. It's head and heart together, and I will tell people, and you know, I'm not ashamed to say that there are things, what we do is deeply meaningful.
Yeah.
It brings me to tears. Yeah. And also when things are hard, I cry. You know, my God, like I'm feeling overwhelmed with my schedule. My sweet executive assistant, Megan's like, what can we do? You know? So, and I tell folks, don't you ever apologize for your tears. Ever.
Amen.
It just means that you care deeply. Or you're touched by it, or it's hard.
Yeah.
And it is.
And it brings, I think that's one of the things that makes for great cultures, is enabling and creating the space for people to bring their whole selves to work and to be supported and to give support. And there's something about Craig that makes that, I think, essential. And it can be a work in progress at different times. But even just coming up to do this interview, I got on the elevator because there was a patient, a family member who were also on. And so I introduced myself and said hello. And as I was getting off at 2 and they were going up to 4, as I was standing there just asking a little bit about them, to see this person's family member just go, thank you so much for this. And I said, you're welcome. I said, and I'm about to cry. And she is about to cry. And so I had a dear friend and mentor from my Kaiser Permanente days, Carrie Conan, who said, you should cry every day.
Yeah.
Should cry every day.
It just means what you're doing matters.
That's right. And sometimes it's the hard tears, and a lot of times it's just tears of joy and, you know, or tears of breakthrough or eurekas, you name it. It's all kinds of things that I get to see here that just make me so excited.
Well, and we're
happy.
lucky to work in these mission-driven organizations that you get the privilege of helping, you know.
What are those few leadership lessons or leadership, I'd say, requirements that you think that folks need to have, and is your responsibility to help them learn?
Right. Wow. The thing that comes to mind first is listening.
That would be good.
Yes.
In a lot of places these days.
Listening everywhere, listening. And we've invested, like, just even in professional development on our own team about how to listen. And I think we do that as an organization, professionally listen, right? Like, what are people's needs? How can we serve? And so I think that's a critical thing for any leader in their development to listen to what people need around them, to notice, to be empathetic about those types of things. So I feel like that is one of the most important things that I see in my daily work. And, it carries over when I think about how we develop our own leaders at the Boettcher Foundation. And we invest deeply in everyone's leadership development. We believe everyone is a leader. Mm-hmm. Everyone has their own individual development plan. We talk about what are their dreams, short-term, midterm, long-term, because we want to be part of that journey. And again, the journey may not always be at Boettcher,
right,
but there's really transparent conversations that happen amongst our team about how do you want to grow, where, and we have feedback loops built in, right? That we're talking about things quarterly. So there's an ability to take ownership in your own growth, right? Mm-hmm, and so I love that about how we build leaders, not just in our investments externally at Boettcher, but how we think about that for our own team and for our scholars. So I'm even thinking we have our scholars experience, which is our retreat for all the incoming students that are starting college in the fall, as well as all of our current students that are at the university. And, that's part fundamentally of what we talk about. We talk about mental health. We talk about listening. We talk about how to be empathetic, support people in need, support friends, how to be a good friend, how to compromise. Some of those pieces, which I wish, especially, charged in our world right now, it feels contentious.
Yeah, well, because it is.
It is. And I think if we were able to continue to see the big picture, and there's always loss, Jandel, in you can't always get your way. Mm-hmm. And so, when leaders come to the table, whether they're trying to compromise about water in Colorado or whatever that is, there's values in conflict. The reality is we usually have the same values. It's just a matter of how much you prioritize them or whatever. So I think if you can look for where we have the commonalities and come from that, I think that really helps you to be effective in a leadership context, no matter what your context is.
So listening, and I would think, just knowing you, that it's listening to the said and the unsaid.
So true.
Listening can involve way more than just your ears.
Well, and what's not being said, right? And who's not invited to the table.
And what's that body language over there saying? Or I'll say to folks, I can see your thought clouds.
That's right.
I can't see what's in them, but I can see just based on things. So there's the listening part there. As I heard listening, I heard empathy. I heard, even before answering this question, this idea that the phrase I use is have these invisible backpacks that are in some parts lived experience, in some part what happened that morning.
Right.
Those sorts of things that you're bringing into the office. So I heard sort of appreciating that. And there's a phrase that, if I were going to encapsulate this, and it is an important leadership thing, what I didn't hear you say is learn the finances. Learn the quality. I mean, those are, that's what I think about we all need to, no matter the thing. Man. That really, this isn't a game of showing what you know. No. It's what's that phrase that goes, people don't care what you know until they know that you care.
Oh, so great. So, yes, absolutely. And it's beyond the IQ. It is the EQ piece, right? The emotional intelligence. And I think even other things I've been reading too, Jandel, just in a world that is so volatile and changing, is your AQ, your adaptability quotient.
Ooh.
Which
AQ.
I love. Yeah. So there's some, I wish I could keep it in my mind to give credit to people that are smarter than me that have those ideas. But I definitely see that, the ability to, things change so quickly. And one of the things that I didn't say that I think that's part of it and the challenge of a leader is, how you were talking about seeing what's not said and the thought clouds or whatever. But I think one of the things that I struggle with too is just the courage sometimes to call it out or take action on it. Because, we have a good thing going and we're getting along, but there's still some conflict. So, making sure that you have the courage to step into that, or you can read the room and how hot the system is. And I'm using air quotes here for those of of the context of how far you can push. And one of my other favorite leadership quotes, leadership is disappointing people at a rate they can accept.
Amen.
Marty Linsky and Ron Heifetz.
I love that.
I love their work. And what I like about that is sometimes, and I think that this is where we get stuck sometimes in life, you end up with, you're passionate about a cause and you care so deeply and you want change now and you want to burn it down because you can't take it anymore. Yes, and there are sometimes systems or people that can't accept change. And so you have to have a balance for how far can you push and how much do you need to bring people along? Because I think part of that leadership challenge is talking to people, inviting them into the conversation, having ownership is part of the solution. But I think that's tough, is pacing change is tough sometimes.
I think it's one of, even back to the question I asked about what will, and I'm going to say we do, or how are we navigating following folks who have built strong organizations with an understanding that we're going to add to the strength, is the pace of that kind of change.
Yes.
And so I'm just grateful that you talked about how that can be tough. And I think the other thing that is sort of part of that is this: how do you manage that conflict? Whether it's
right,
well, wait a minute, we're not old. This isn't like we used to do it, or those sorts of things. How you manage and work through that in a way that preserves your soul and doesn't let us get afraid to do what we need to do,
or question the systems that must be torn down.
Yeah.
Right.
And you got to do it. You got to do it. And I don't know how you do it, but I'll tell you that for me, I want this place to be here 100 years from now, 200 years. This is a 117-year-old institution.
Awesome.
That back to adaptive quotients, they've lived it, starting with TB and then polio. Yes. And now neurorehabilitation for spinal cord and brain injury. Now, they're not going to let me deliver babies here. I always have to say that at some point. We've got plenty of work to do in this space. There is so much to do, both in terms of the current, building off of the legacy of what this wonderful, wonderful gem for the country, let alone the world, is in some ways. But then its future. We've got exciting plans that go beyond capital, in terms of the physical space, but thinking about the communities, back to some of the work that you all are even thinking about, the communities out there that we send patients back to. And I'll call them patients then when we send them back, but they are persons. They are people living alongside a disability. And there's work to do in those communities that we have a responsibility to engage in, to lead, make better for people. And so, and that one's not a hard one to push, but it certainly, at all. I mean, people are excited about the potential there and see the importance and see the enormity of a task like that, and how you even do it alongside other partners while doing the work we need to do today. Right. To evolve our inpatient programs.
Past, present, future.
You're always living it. Well, I want to thank you, but I also want to make sure I give you last word.
Oh, I'm grateful. So my last word is gratitude. Thank you, friend, so much. And you have continued to be a wonderful role model and friend for me these many years. And it's awesome to be on the journey together. So
it's a journey. We're going to take it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. So Katie and I go back nearly 20 years in friendship. It's coming on pretty soon, next year. It'll be 20 years that we've known each other, and I've watched her growth. Not that she didn't already start as such a strong leader even back then, and it's been just a real gift to know a leader of this caliber, and a friend and a person and a woman of this caliber. So much was packed into our time together. I like the concept of philanthropy in 4 dimensions, that it's not just about the treasure they give away, but the time that they invest in those that they serve, the opportunity to help develop talent through philanthropy, not just those who are asking, but how they use she uses her role in supporting communities to connect people. And obviously the treasure, but also the ties. That is, we're building community. We're making new friends. We're connecting new people, new ideas. What an amazing treasure and an essential part of strong communities great foundations are and great philanthropy of all sorts are. I loved when she said we're servants. I think we all are, and I think it's one of the more important roles that we play as leaders is this idea of recognizing that we actually serve missions, we serve communities. And to think about leadership, I love that she grounded what we do. And we've both been blessed to stand on the shoulders of some incredible giants who've built wonderful, wonderful organizations. And our accountability, responsibility, and the joy is to make sure those organizations endure while we're evolving them based on what's needed at the time. You never forget the essential parts of the legacy that's been built, the core of who organizations are. And we have to make sure, in order to serve the future, that we're paying in very close attention and are mindful of the present. And then, of course, we've got to be looking out over the horizon based on what we're seeing right now around what next, and having to step boldly and courageously into those spaces, even when our voice is shaking, as I said. And then this idea, because of what philanthropy has the ability to do through being more flexible, about matching capital to needs, then looking at the work that they're doing now, recognizing that we are in desperate, desperate need of strong leadership on so many planes and dimensions today. And supporting communities this way is important. And then, my heavens, the adaptability quotient. When I wrote that down, I thought, well, that is Craig's DNA, in terms of both who we serve, but also in terms of this incredible team of professionals of all stripes that have to meet patients and families where they are and adapt their style in order to do the best work that we do here. There's a versatility that's part of being adaptable that really is a true core leadership strength. And probably finally, Katie's clearly amazing. Good grief, multi-generational Coloradan, just always a person who says yes to opportunity, but leads boldly and courageously and has the ability at the same time to be vulnerable and talk about the tough stuff. I loved this conversation because of that. But, finally, that recognition that part of what builds strong cultures and makes them endure is making sure that we really are tending to that next group of leaders and the opportunity that we all have to lead from wherever we stand. And that leadership is so, so, so much more than a title. So I would say, again, I feel so blessed to get to do what I do every day in service to Craig Hospital and our community. And these conversations, trust me, I get way more than I give. And I've taken away from Katie today some real cool things to think about in terms of how I serve at Craig, but also how I care for myself. And I hope you did too. So thank you for making time to be part of this Unstoppable at Craig episode. Thanks so much.
And I think we do that as an organization, professionally listen, right? Like, what are people's needs? How can we serve? So I think that's a critical thing for any leader in their development to listen to what people need around them, to notice, to be empathetic about those types of things. So I feel like that is one of the most important things that I see in my daily work. And, it carries over when I think about how we develop our own leaders at the Boettcher Foundation. And we invest deeply in everyone's leadership development. We believe everyone is a leader. Mm-hmm. Everyone has their own individual development plan. We talk about what are their dreams, short-term, mid-term, long-term, because we want to be part of that journey. Mm-hmm, and so I love that about how we build leaders, not just in our investments externally at Boettcher, but how we think about that for our own team and for our scholars